For a large group of people, mostly that exist online, it wasn't enough, like, love a player, love Caitlyn, love whoever you want to love. But it was simultaneously, they had to then say that every player that ever came before was trash.
No. That is not correct.
At this point, confidence in USA Basketball's managing director, Sue Bird, has completely evaporated. And after what came to light this week, it's hard to fault anyone for feeling that way. The official in charge of building Team USA rosters appeared on a podcast with Katie Nolan and made a statement so openly biased, it raises serious concerns about whether someone with that mindset should be making decisions of this magnitude.
The managing director is Sue Bird, UConn. I've talked about this, right? The UConn bias, this and that and the other. Of course, I did a video yesterday, Katie Nolan, formerly of ESPN, formerly of Fox Sports, formerly of NBC Sports, formerly of anybody that will possibly give her a platform.
Sue Bird is the managing director of USA Basketball, a role that gives her direct authority over who represents the country on the international stage. And yet, she chose to sit down with Katie Nolan, a media figure whose stints at ESPN, Fox Sports, and NBC Sports ended in failure, and allowed that platform to be used to take aim at Caitlin Clark's fan base. But the real issue goes deeper. The danger isn't just that Bird elevated Nolan's voice. It's that Bird's own comments in that same conversation crossed a clear and troubling line.
For a large group of people, mostly that exist online, it wasn't enough, like, love a player, love Caitlyn, love whoever you want to love. But it was simultaneously, they had to then say that every player that ever came before was trash.
No. That is not correct. That's not a thing. Sure, do you probably have an outlier group of people?
Pay close attention to what she actually said. Sue Bird claimed that Caitlin Clark's fans entered the WNBA, and Lane Antley allegedly remarked that every player who came before was trash. That's a direct quote from the conversation. Every player that ever came before was trash. The problem is glaring. It's factually wrong. This isn't a marginal opinion or a fringe viewpoint. Bird is painting the entire fan base with the same brush. And when you hold the power to shape rosters, that kind of bias isn't just questionable, it's disqualifying.
Josh Allen and Tom Brady are trash. Those fans exist, right? Here's the thing. Nobody thought the players that came before them were trash. No fans came into this league and thought that. What fans did think was, we don't really care about those players. We don't. We should not have to come into...
Here's the reality. Fans never thought previous players were trash. They were simply indifferent. And there's a huge difference between the two, one that Sue Bird either doesn't grasp or refuses to admit. Indifference doesn't mean hate or disrespect. It means a lack of interest. Millions of sports fans around the world understand this. NBA fans, for example, watched Michael Jordan, not Sacramento Kings games. They didn't study the entire history of basketball, they followed one player, and that was enough. This is how fan engagement works across every league.
Product, and these people be angry at us because we don't want to go through some fandom checklist. Here's why they don't we're indifferent to the previous players. We simply don't care. We don't care. We're not interested in knowing those players' histories, blah, 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 and that's okay. That doesn't mean we think that...
Consider this. How many NFL fans watch only their favorite team? How many baseball fans care only about the playoffs? How many soccer fans tune in solely for the World Cup? Sports fandom has always been like this. Fans are free to follow a specific player, team, or league. They don't owe anyone a history lesson. No one needs to tick off a fandom checklist to prove they deserve to watch. Yet, the WNBA seems to think their fans are different, that if you don't celebrate every part of their history, you're somehow a bad fan.
Diana Taurasi is one of the greatest women's basketball players of all time. And even before I came in to watch and consume, I heard her name. I would see some highlights on ESPN, on SportsCenter, back when SportsCenter was good and was still consumable, etc. I just simply was so indifferent to her and this league that I chose not to consume it.
Sue Bird herself acknowledged that Diana Taurasi is one of the greatest women's basketball players ever. Most fans remember seeing her name on SportsCenter back when it was actually worth watching. They watched highlights, heard the accolades, and yet still chose not to follow the WNBA, not because Taurasi wasn't great, but because they were indifferent to the league. That's not an insult. It's simply reality. The fact that Sue Bird cannot tell the difference between indifference and hatred speaks volumes about her mindset.
In this league was trash. No, you guys are simply angry because nobody cares to go back and take in your catalog. Hey, Office Space, Michael Bolton. We just celebrated his entire catalog. The WNBA, we don't celebrate their entire catalog. Sorry, we don't. Even now, I'm sorry, I'm not watching any team.
Here's where it gets truly absurd. These same critics are upset that fans don't go back and consume the league's entire history, as if new viewers somehow owe them a homework assignment. Imagine the NFL insisting that every new Patrick Mahomes fan watch every Joe Montana game first. Or the NBA requiring Stephen Curry fans to study the full history of point guards before enjoying basketball. It sounds ridiculous because it is, but that's exactly the expectation the WNBA is setting. And when fans don't comply, they're labeled bigots, racists, or hit with some other unfair accusation.
Not the Indiana Fever. Do you know how many NBA fans only watched Michael Jordan? Only watched Magic Johnson, only watched Larry Bird? That was a thing. Even when I was a huge NBA fan, do you think I was going out of my way to watch Sacramento Kings games?
Watching only the Indiana Fever doesn't make someone a bad fan. It makes them a typical fan. That's how sports fandom works. Not every NBA fan followed every team. Back in the early 2000s, there had to be something compelling to get people to watch Sacramento Kings games. Fans tune in because they're interested, not out of obligation. The WNBA, however, seems to miss this basic truth. They expect fans to consume their product out of duty rather than genuine passion, and that's not how you grow a loyal, sustainable audience.
Going back and consuming it, I'm sure you got a few fans that want to do that. Came in and thought this was the greatest league ever after not ever watching it. Sorry, no. It's not. In fact, in a lot of these games, there's some really bad basketball being played right now in this league that at times is nearly unwatchable.
The reality is straightforward. Fans are indifferent to past WNBA players. Not hateful, not disrespectful, just indifferent. They simply aren't motivated to go back and watch old games or study the careers of players they never saw. And that's perfectly fine. If Sue Bird and others interpret this as hatred, that's their issue. Indifference is not the same as animosity. Confusing the two either shows a basic misunderstanding of how fandom works or a deliberate attempt to mischaracterize new fans as villains.
Sorry, no. It's not. In fact, in a lot of these games, there's some really bad basketball being played right now in this league that at times is nearly unwatchable. Okay, I mean, that's fine to say out loud. It doesn't make me a son of a bitch. It doesn't.
Here's the uncomfortable truth about the league itself. Some of the basketball being played right now is genuinely poor. There are games that are nearly unwatchable at times. That's not an insult. It's an observation. Noticing it doesn't make someone a bad person or a hater. It makes them honest. If the level of play were consistently elite, fans would tune in regardless of who's on the court. But when casual viewers are expected to sit through sloppy execution and weak fundamentals, it's no surprise they lose interest, and they certainly shouldn't be blamed for it.
I mean, and to go out there, you're the what, managing director or something of USA Basketball, It is frightening to me that you are going to make decisions potentially about who's representing our country in Team USA. All because you don't like the fact that we don't want to consume your agenda. And we all know what I'm talking about. No, I'm not going to consume your agenda. And we don't have to.
Here's where it gets truly alarming. Sue Bird, as managing director of USA Basketball, holds the power to decide who represents the country internationally. Yet, on a public podcast, she made it clear she's frustrated that fans don't follow her agenda. We know exactly what that agenda is. Her comments and her choice of platforms have spelled it out. Now, there's no way to trust that her roster decisions will be based solely on merit and performance. Publicly attacking a fan base for not aligning with your worldview exposes a bias that casts doubt over every decision she makes moving forward.
And I gotta be honest, at this point, you're not gonna convince me there's not an anti-Caitlin Clark bias going on with people like Sue Bird now. Sorry, Sue Bird. Congratulations. You just put yourself in there. And now
they keep trying to dictate how fans should engage, as if there's a right way to enjoy sports, a checklist you must pass before you're allowed to watch basketball. At this point, the pattern is unmistakable. There's a clear anti-Caitlin Clark bias at the top levels of women's basketball. Sue Bird just placed herself squarely in that category. She gave a platform to someone who attacked Clark's fans and added her own commentary that mischaracterized an entire fan base as hateful, when in reality, they're simply indifferent to the league's history.
Nobody said any previous players were trash. We just chose not to go back and consume. And that is okay. Sports fans, that is okay. That doesn't make you a bigot or a racist or a phobe or an ism or none of that mother effing.
No one ever claimed that past WNBA players were trash. That's not what happened. Fans simply chose not to revisit players they never followed in the first place, and that choice is completely valid. Sports fans make similar decisions every day across every league. The difference is other leagues don't attack their fans for it. They don't have managing directors appearing on podcasts to criticize viewers for not studying the complete history before being allowed to watch. Sue Bird's comments reveal her priorities. She's more focused on forcing fans to acknowledge past players than on growing the game through new stars. She's more concerned with policing how people consume the WNBA than with making the product compelling enough that fans want to watch. Sue Bird is willing to label an entire fan base as hateful rather than acknowledge a simple truth. Most people were indifferent to women's professional basketball until Caitlin Clark gave them a reason to care. That indifference isn't bigotry, racism, or any kind of ism. It's simply the natural state of most sports fans toward most sports products. The NBA, NFL, and MLB all understand this. Yet the WNBA seems to think their fans are uniquely obligated to care about every player who ever played, and if they don't, they're somehow bad fans. That's not how you build a fan base. That's how you alienate the people who actually show up. What makes Sue Bird's stance even more concerning is her position. She's not just a former player sharing an opinion. Sue Bird is the managing director of USA Basketball. That means she holds real influence over Olympic rosters, World Cup teams, and every decision about who represents the United States in international women's basketball. And yet, she has shown open contempt for Caitlin Clark's fan base, claiming they view all previous players as trash and giving a platform to someone who directly attacked them. How can anyone trust that her decisions will be fair? Imagine this happening in any other sport. If the person selecting the men's Team USA basketball roster went on a podcast and attacked LeBron James fans for not caring about players from the 1970s, or labeled an entire fan base as hateful simply for being indifferent. It's unthinkable, and that's exactly why Bird's actions are so concerning. In any other sport, there would be immediate calls for that person to step down. When you hold power, personal biases cannot be allowed to affect decisions that impact athletes' careers and a country's competitive success. Yet in the WNBA, this behavior appears to carry no consequence. Sue Bird can go on Katie Nolan's podcast, attack the fan base of the league's biggest star, mischaracterize millions as hateful, and face zero accountability. She openly demonstrates bias against the fans who are actually helping grow the sport, and no one in authority seems concerned that she controls roster decisions. That's alarming, not just for Caitlin Clark, but for any player whose fan base doesn't align with Bird's idea of proper WNBA fandom. The reality is simple. Caitlin Clark brought millions of new fans to women's basketball. They came for her, they watch for her, they buy tickets and subscribe to streaming services for her. And they owe no one an apology for not following Diana Taurasi's career, Breanna Stewart's championships, or any other player's achievements. Fans are allowed to support one player without studying the entire history of the sport. That's normal. That's how fandom works across every league. Yet Sue Bird and others in the WNBA establishment can't accept this truth. They treat these new fans as somehow lesser because they didn't pay their dues by watching when no one else did. They resent that Caitlin Clark achieved in a single season what decades of previous stars couldn't: mainstream attention and commercial success. Instead of celebrating that growth and welcoming new fans, they attack them. They label them hateful and accuse them of thinking past players were trash. They do everything to make these fans feel unwelcome. And now, the person leading these attacks is the managing director of USA Basketball, the one with input on whether Caitlin Clark makes future Olympic teams, the one influencing international roster decisions. Through her own words, she has shown contempt for Clark's fan base and an inability to distinguish between indifference and hatred.